Hey everyone, welcome to this podcast called Ken Reads, where I can read out your letter that you've shared with me in the hopes that I can better help you understand what the F just happened between you and the last partner you were dating, whether it was in a relationship or a situationship. I look at these experiences from the lens of attachment theory. I don't just come up with thought terminating cliches like, they're just not that into you, or if they wanted to, they would. While some of those phrases might have their benefit in other dynamics, I try and look at this from the lens of, is there perhaps an insecure attachment issue that's at play in these particular dynamics? And though I am an Australian counsellor, I am not someone who is going to be responding to these letters as if I was with a client. I'm here to provide validation, yes, but I can't provide any diagnoses on these. So even if, a lot of people might understandably hear this and be like, well, that sounds like a narcissist. At best, I'll probably say, sounds a bit narky. I probably won't go any further than that out of respect to my ethical boundaries in regards to what I can and can't do. If you find this of benefit to you, fantastic. That's what I want. And if you want to submit your letter, you're very welcome to once there is obviously availability per month. And I'll happily read out and share my own 2 cents as to what I think has gone on in your dating experience to offer you a sense of validation for what you've been through and also to give other people listening a chance to feel like maybe this relates to what they've also experienced as part of collective healing. So, with that all out of the way, let's dive in to the latest letter.
Hi, everybody. This is Megan Brito with Ken Read Counseling, and today I'm going to be reading a letter submitted by one of our followers. I'm going to be reading this letter by myself today. So I am looking forward to getting into it and seeing what this individual experienced with their relationship with somebody who I'm going to guess probably had an avoidant attachment style of some kind. So before I get into it, I do want to give an introduction about myself. So as I said earlier, my name is Megan Brito. I am a team member with Ken at Ken Read Counseling. So with Ken, I work as an attachment coach. I help individuals to work on healing their own insecure attachment. I help individuals to help process perhaps betrayal off of the back of a relationship with somebody that struggled with their own significant attachment woundings, and feeling really blindsided by that relationship, or if their ex-partner struggled with things like addiction, including things around gambling addictions, sex and pornography addictions, anything around alcohol or substances, I can support with that. And I can also help individuals if they are in a relationship with somebody and they themselves are, fairly secure and they are needing some support in how to show up and support their partner with their insecure attachment styles as well. So a little bit of what I do with Ken. So I work part-time with Ken as a coach in that capacity. And then full-time, I am a registered social worker with the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers. And I provide addiction counseling to individuals in my community, which is located in rural Southwestern Ontario, Canada. I specialize in behavior addictions. So I do work with folks that have things like sex and pornography addictions, gambling addictions. We refer to it as technology use. So that's things like your phone, social media, tablet, surfing the internet for a little bit too long, video game use, binge eating, a little bit of hoarding as well. So that's what I do full time as a social worker offering counseling. And for many, many years, I worked frontline in the sector of domestic violence. So I did frontline work, shelter work with women and children fleeing domestic violence. So also putting that to context in the work that I do with Ken, as sometimes the behaviors or dynamics that are severely wounded in terms of attachment woundings, but the severely wounded partners can engage in can be abusive. Even if there may not be any physical violence, that doesn't mean abuse isn't present. So I also talk about that. So those are some things that I do with Ken at Ken Read Counseling, some of the things that I do full time. And again, that's a little bit about me in a nutshell. So with that introduction, I will go ahead and get into this letter reading. So for this letter, the individual that submitted it, I'm going to call her Evelyn. And the individual that she was dating, she would like us to call him Shane, not his real name. So that was the name she asked us to refer to him as. So going into the letter now. So it says here, Shane, who is 31 and male, messaged me, 28-year-old female, almost immediately after matching on a dating app in early March 2024. His intentions weren't clear. His bio included looking for new friends, but also his height, weight, and body type. Okay, we're going to come back to that. So kind of like, if we're just looking for friends, we're not really concerned or preoccupied about what our height, weight, and body type looks like. I know I'm not when I look for friendships, and I don't know anybody that is unless they're looking for a relationship romantically. So we're gonna maybe coming back and visiting that. Okay, so continuing on, it says, we met up 3 days later for a walk and kept texting on the app afterwards. He invited me over to his place. I dodged at first, but he invited me again. So I accepted and met up at his apartment a month after our first meeting. So it says in parentheses here, for a cultural context, things go way, with multiple A's, way slower here with all kinds of relationships. So I hope I'm pretty sure actually later in the letter it may indicate where the individual is from. So we try to keep any revealing information out, but I understand that for the individual, for Evelyn that submitted this letter, it was really important for her to share that with me for that cultural context. And I also feel like it's relevant to share with you and it's not giving away too much. Something that's also find very interesting. Ken and I talk about it. I think Ken also talked about it in some of his other work. And I think Amy definitely talks about it too, is that the idea of attachment styles and attachment woundings is not just a thing prevalent in Western cultures. This is something that we have seen with people from all over the world. I have worked with people who are from, we think of like European or North American cultures. I live in Canada. I have a lot of American clients. I have clients in, English speaking parts of Europe and the UK, but I've also worked with people from the Middle East. I've worked with people from Asia. Cultures are very different than, again, westernized culture. And when we think, attachment theory and things we talk about in psychology, that's a very Western, these are very Western concepts. These are rooted in Western understandings and ideologies. So even though this person, I'm going to take a guess, probably isn't from a Western culture, attachment wounding still show up. So, with my clients, I'm going to take a guess it's probably in here. So I wanted to share that a little bit too. Going back into the letter reading here. So again, talking about that where she's from, relationships of all kinds go really slow. Said he seemed a little self-conscious when asked he didn't oh sorry, let me try that again. He seemed a little self-conscious when asked. He said he was looking for new friends on the app, yet an hour later we were cuddling on his bed, but he didn't do anything. Okay, so some physical contact, no sexual intimacy. But again, when I make friends, I don't cuddle with them. That's typically reserved for romantic partners. Or my dog. When I had my dog, we would cuddle too. So it said here, instead, he told me about his parents' divorce, not meeting his dad since he was 5, hitting his mother once as a teenager. I was kind of fed up with the trauma dumping, so made the first move. He said he was surprised because he didn't think I was interested in intimacy because I quote unquote seemed bookish. Okay, so I take back that comment of no intimacy happened. It didn't start out that way. But again, when we're looking for friends, we're not going into cuddling. We're not going into then sexual intimacy. So kind of goes back to that point of on his dating profile. I'm just looking for friends, but we're talking about his height, his weight, and his body image. Again, we're not like we don't talk about that stuff when we're looking for friends or like posting thirst traps. So it's this idea of saying one thing but doing something else, and the trauma dumping that Shane is engaging in. Again, we don't, we're not really doing that when we're making friends or looking for friendships. But I can appreciate sometimes that happens. And that's kind of just a red flag. If you barely know anybody and they're telling you their whole life story, I tend to put the brakes on pretty hard. And if this person, again, is sharing their most vulnerable, intimate experiences with you and you don't know each other from a hole in the wall, that's not a good sign. So um, that's coming up. So I am actually hearing some attachment woundings, maybe just dismissive avoidant, maybe fearful avoidant. We don't quite know yet, but these are some attachment woundings surfacing. And even him saying that I quote unquote seemed bookish, so I didn't want to make the first move. That's a pretty presumptuous thing to assume about somebody. So what I'm hearing is for Shane, again, I don't know if it's going to be in this letter, but I'm very curious about his understandings or relationships that he's had that are like sexual in nature. If he always gravitated towards a certain person that looked very, when we think about like hot, sexy in a magazine, and it sounds like Evelyn doesn't look that part. So that kind of, I'm curious about that. So again, I'll keep reading. It said here, he also had erectile difficulties, which made me think afterwards that he could not have been a player. From that meeting on, we texted almost every day for 2 months, and he seemed to be very caring, considerate, playful, but often mentioned exhaustion due to work. This made me feel like this wasn't just a casual relationship. I wasn't in a hurry, felt like he was putting in effort, and was aware that relationships remain in a gray zone much longer in Japan. Okay. So I was talking about, I wonder if people can often think about attachment or attachment theory being a very westernized concept, or depending on who you talk to. So people will refer to it as like a colonization type of concept. Um, you can call it whatever you want or recognize it came from a certain part of the globe. But like I said, and it's shown in here, and there are themes showing up about attachment woundings, they don't care what part of the world you're from, because our trauma and our upbringing and how we bond with people, while it may look different in different cultures, the universal experience shared is that we do have to bond and connect with others to feel seen and to feel safe in this world. Doesn't matter what part of the globe you're from, when that's fractured in some way, we are going to struggle connecting with others and engaging in intimacy as adults. And so far, that's what I'm here that's showing up in this letter. So I'll keep going. So again, gray zone in Japan. So I didn't want to be pushy, clarifying things. However, things suddenly changed mid-June when he suddenly stopped initiating texting. I didn't think much of it, but when he left me on read for a couple days, says this was a first at that point. I messaged him to ask if he was okay. He said he was just busy with work. I offered to stop texting if he didn't have the bandwidth and asked him to contact me once he knew his schedule so that we can arrange to meet. He thanked me and said my kindness moved him. The next day he reached out, but then left my reply unread again. This time I let it be. I messaged him a week later to set up a meeting, and he shared a meme with me from his private friends and family Instagram account. I sent a follow request, which he denied. Okay, so I'm just going to put a pause here. I do recognize I'm kind of sharing quite a bit of my internal thoughts with this letter thus far. So again, kind of some things that are really sticking out to me when we do look at attachment woundings that are surfacing that I am seeing with Shane, was again kind of talking about some of the stuff, intimacy in the bedroom. So him talking about having erectile dysfunction, and Evelyn, you said maybe he's not a player. Again, I don't know, and truthfully, there's not enough information to say if he's a player or if he has erectile dysfunction specifically, but if there's gonna be intimacy, that usually comes up before, before anything is started or initiated. And what we also do recognize is that if somebody has usually avoided, these are more avoidant attachment woundings, what will look like erectile dysfunction will actually happen because when we are able to engage in sex and intimacy or sexual intimacy, um, there's often degrees of vulnerability and bonding that happens. And if intimacy doesn't feel safe in some level, it feels threatening, the body's going to do whatever it needs to do to protect itself from what it perceives to be a threat. That threat is, again, intimacy and connection and vulnerability. So that can look like, we see this with men, what can look like having erectile dysfunction. And oftentimes they don't when it's attachment wounding surfacing, but it's the body's way of saying, if I can't keep it up, I don't have to do this. I don't have to, have an erection and continue with sex. And I can limit the risk of rejection or connection because it's so threatening for me. We can see with both men and women having a low libido, having little to no sex drive, or getting disgusted by their partner. Again, these are things more with the avoidant attachment woundings that surface because, again, sexual intimacy with people that there is interest and care with can be very threatening to the nervous system. So that's why we can see these things. So kind of some flags are being raised about that. And something else that really stood out to me is that, Evelyn, when you communicated with him, is like, is this too much around texting and talking? Um, you kind of just, you wanted to check in with him and just say, are you doing okay? Is there something I can do for you? In one way or another, you're saying that I care about you. Your needs matter to me. Your well-being matters to me. He said that moved him. And often when we do hear people that, again, lean avoidant say things like, this was so moving to me, or are quite flabbergasted or surprised just by the kindness or consideration of others, that can be pretty basic. That really speaks to a lack of attention and affection and care that was given to him growing up, right? He talked about the trauma dumping, talked about early in the letter. That's absolutely what it was. We tend to see that more with folks that are more fearful avoidant. Doesn't mean that someone who is dismissive avoidant doesn't or can't, but we typically see it with somebody that's fearful avoidant. So again, it's too early for me to kind of wonder what his attachment style is, but I'm maybe fearful avoidant, but we'll see. But regardless, that trauma dumping piece, we see that with some pretty significant attachment woundings. And from what I'm reading so far, it sounds like he's leaning pretty dismissive. All right, so I'll get back into the letter here. So again, as Evelyn was saying, she sent a follow request on Instagram. He denied it. And she says here, I got pissed off. I told him that I didn't know if he was self-centered or stringing me along, but either way, I was out and canceled our next meeting. He apologized profusely. He told me he was literally sick and that work had been hectic, so his judgment was compromised. He said he had no intentions of stringing me along and that I share with you almost everything that I don't share with other people. Okay, we're going to come back to that. I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, and things went back to normal. A week later, I even got a message at 9 a.m. saying, I can't do this for much longer, which I thought was a sign that he did think of me as someone close. We kept up the meeting once a month, paced with texting in between, but I was getting increasingly frustrated. He was always enthusiastic and considerate when we texted, but he was initiating less. I tried to not put extra pressure on him as he seemed to be very overwhelmed with work. However, since our first 3 meetings, he never invited me out or over to his place. Granted, he always thanked me for inviting him and was incredibly sweet and cuddly when we did meet. I was starting to feel like I was doing all the boring work of keeping this connection alive. At that point, I tried to be understanding of his position. So then it says in parentheses here, work culture in the private sector can be really brutal in Tokyo. And I trust when he said he had no intentions of stringing me along. Okay, I'm just going to put a pause here. So again, there's a lot going on in this portion of the letter. So a big theme that's sticking out to me is around communication. And this was actually in the beginning of the letter too. So when you guys first connected, right, so you met up, Evelyn, you initiated some intimacy, and then Shane, basically every day for 2 months, was just texting you and sharing open and vulnerable things with you in between your meetings. Um, and you know, again, you kind of had this moment of frustration, understandably, when he wouldn't friend you on in social media because, again, you talk if you're messaging every day, you know there was intimacy involved. I'd be frustrated too. I'd want answers. I'd want to know what's going on and why. So I don't think that's out of place for you. Um, when he shared, I'm not trying to string you along. Um, Things at work are very hectic. So I think a big thing for him is communication feels like it's too much. So when he said, I can't do this for much longer, he said he's feeling sick and working in the private sector is so heavy and it's so busy in Japan. And I've heard that too. So absolutely not denying that and something we see. So I wonder if maybe when we think about, cultural differences living in Tokyo and attachment woundings, it's kind of like these two themes are kind of like running on a track together. They're parallel, where they're both, we have a cultural context, we have an attachment wounding context, but how they're running parallel together is that we see them both really will just take over the life of the individual. They're spending so much time working. And when attachment woundings are there, which I am hearing throughout this letter, is that that again, that train track is on, is that folks that are, we tend to see it more anxious, but more avoidant than anything, is that they will basically be workaholics to avoid having to sit with their own feelings, sit with their own experiences, anything to just avoid having to feel and basically sit with their own shit. It's too overwhelming and it's too threatening for them. So they will work multiple jobs or they will work until they're sick, literally sick, or work exhaustion will land them in the hospital to just avoid intimacy with other people or having to sit with themselves. So I think both of these things are going on. Both of these things are true. They're again running on a parallel and they're really impacting Shane's life. A little bit is attachment, a little bit is culture, but they're both existing together. So, him being really a little bit more open with you through texting and more vulnerable with you, in a way, it's also, again, he's kind of sharing things that are intimate for him. And he's sharing so much about himself. And he said he shares things with you that he doesn't share with other people. It can be easier for folks that again lean avoidant to do these things over text as opposed to in person because you're kind of hiding behind a screen. It doesn't feel as threatening. And again, just from what I'm reading, from what I understand, Shane hasn't communicated these things in person, really vulnerable things about him. Most of it has been through text. So the intimacy feels safer when it's not face to face. And that's what I'm hearing. So again, we see this with attachment woundings, having to be that intimate and be that open face to face with somebody can be perceived as being way, way too threatening. So recognizing that there's some elements here, again, these are some attachment woundings that are surfacing for sure. Okay, so again, going along here with the letter. Oh shoot, I lost my place. I'm so sorry. There we go. Okay, so it says here the last drop in the bucket was on September 23rd when I thought I saw him still using the dating app we matched on. And I went after him again and told him he was stringing me along despite saying he wasn't. Uh, he asked what I meant by stringing along. I told him proactively invite me to meet, and we always met at his place and not outside. Granted, when I invited him to meet, he asked if I wanted to go out or stay in, and I chose staying in because we were only meeting once a month. Um, Also, I should probably add this now. I recognize I forgot to bring it up before the letter reading. So Evelyn, she did send me an email providing a little bit of context to add to the letter. So Evelyn did share in the letter that she's not, when she connected with Shane, she wasn't looking for um like a committed, like we are together, go all in relationship. It was, she is looking for somebody, but it's like it's okay if we kind of meet on a little bit more of a casual basis. Um, so for Evelyn, yes, kind of it's okay if we don't meet every day as often. Um, that's what she was looking for, but recognizing the intensity of the relationship between her and Shane, um, it kind of makes sense to have this natural progression of things between both of them, becoming closer, becoming more committed, becoming more intimate in person, as opposed to just kind of keeping this face to face. Um, so, even though it was a little bit more relaxed with the expectations, Shane is really showing that he's wanting something a little like showing something different. So I wanted to add that. Add that for context as why, they're kind of that dating app is still open for both of them. So recognizing that that came up. So back to the letter, it said he denied using the app, meeting, or inviting anyone else to his apartment besides me. He said we always stayed in because he accepted my offers to stay in, which he suspected I made out of consideration for his work situation. He said he wanted us to be close and he wasn't in it just for the sex. I told him I wanted to believe him. Uh, I also told him that I wasn't in a rush, but I did want to clarify things from once his work situation calmed down. And that was the end of this conflict. From mid-October to the end of January of 2025, things were pretty good. I was still the only one doing the inviting. He was definitely initiating texting more. He quit his job at the end of November and went on a 2-week solo trip in Europe. He, quote unquote, coincidentally, uh, ended up spending some time in my home country on his way from Slovakia to Germany. It says here in parentheses, Germany is north of Slovakia and Hungary is south of Slovakia. So it does not seem like an accident. Okay, so kind of what I'm hearing from that, again, trying to like go back to like my geography class. You're right. It's kind of in the middle. It's it's very intentional to get there. So yeah. So it's as you said, it doesn't seem like an accident. And again, not a geography or major, but it sounds like to, kind of get to that place, you really have to plan your route. So it said he complimented me more, telling me how kind I was, how he appreciated that I was looking out for him, etc. However, by mid-January, I was getting on edge again because I couldn't really understand his behavior. Uh, on the one hand, he initiated texting more, complimented me both physically and personality, was super sweet and cuddly whenever we met, hugged me goodbye, even when we were in public. Not even couples, not even couples would necessarily hug in public. So I think reading that again in parentheses, that cultural piece of in Japan, hugging or those public personal displays of affection is not really a common thing like we would see in maybe other parts of the world. Um, Sincere brought me souvenirs from his trips to his hometown and also mentioned souvenirs he would bring me from future trips. One time we were just lying next to each other, and he started talking about how sad it was that all good things eventually come to an end, that his grandma would pass away, and that this would one day come to an end. Um, so again, what I'm hearing, and this is something we see often, folks that lean really more avoidant than anxious, is that there is this internal belief that basically good things come to an end. So that can also be a contributing factor as to why getting connected and developing intimacy with another person is too vulnerable. And they struggle to do that because they've had repeated experiences of, relationships that were good for them, they enjoyed, or again, meant a lot to them, in some way ended, whether it's the death of somebody that mattered a lot to them. We can see that like a parent or a grandparent or a sibling. So if there's a death involved, if they perhaps were cheated on by somebody, um, or friendships, really good friendships that suddenly dissolved or broke apart, we can see those things. So again, that's kind of this red flag sticking out of all good things come to an end. Yeah, so reading the letter, continuing with the letter, so it says by, again, quote unquote, this, he very clearly meant my nipples, which was very confusing. Why include my, again, quote unquote, body parts in this philosophical musings if it was just a casual situationship? But then if it wasn't, then it was weirdly objectifying. Yeah, so I was going to say, I kind of had the pause of like, I was reading it and I was like, am I reading this correctly? So again, I think, again, not with Evelyn, this is going to be more of like a thing going on with Shane, is that, again, from how the letter is reading, Shane is saying, oh, it's going to be such disappointment that your physical body, like that's going to come to an end. This idea of, again, just from what I'm hearing from it, like not seeing you anymore, we're not going to have sex anymore. Um, this is this good thing that's coming to an end. But again, as Evelyn said, if this was like, this is weird, it's oddly objectifying, I would definitely agree. And again, she phrased it as philosophical musings. And I think that's a good way to put, again, like the intensity and the depth of the relationship. That's not there if this was just something casual. So I think, Evelyn, you did a good job of highlighting, again, this kind of like weird objectifying that doesn't fit the intensity and the closeness of the relationship. So I wanted to highlight that. So again, continuing on with the letters here. It said, so in mid-January, I asked him out for a coffee to clarify things. He asked me what I wanted to clarify, and I told him that I wanted to ask him if we could meet once every 2 to 3 weeks instead of meeting once a month. He seemed super excited. He said he's down to whatever I wanted to do. So instead of a clarifying coffee, we went out for a pleasant dinner, and he even talked about what restaurants he wanted to go to. So it says here proactivity. I was again flooded, relatively speaking, with texts for the next week or so, and I thought things would finally be more stable and he would be more proactive. But then he only initiated texting once in February. I didn't know what to make of the situation. He said he would be happy to meet more than once, but I saw nothing on his part to make it happen. On March 1st, 2025, we were texting, and he mentioned he was going to Korea for a couple of days, but would bring me a souvenir, also saying, I will come back alive, so wait for me. He also said he was doing a lot of reading in English for his new job, and he sent me a screenshot. I told him to be careful because it was proprietary and confidential material. Okay. He said he was aware, but trusted me, so sent it anyway. If I did that as like a social worker, by nice having a license, that would be gone in any other field. So I find that very interesting. Any other profession, you share confidential information, you are Like you're done. Pink slip, you are fired. If you're part of a registered body, like a license to practice a certain thing, that license is usually suspended. So this is kind of, again, this is interesting. This is weird. Kind of wondering about that. So then here, a couple of days later, I saw an Insta story he reposted of the trip, and it hit me hard because I thought this was a business trip, although he never said it explicitly, but it turned out to be just a trip with friends. Um, I messaged him saying that it hurt a lot to see him being able to go on trips with friends, but not meeting me more than once a month due to quote unquote work, and not knowing his intentions all this time was taking a toll on me and wanted to talk. So, again, I think with this part of the letter that I'm reading, again, maybe a little bit of a nutshell, but some big themes that are sticking out is that, Evelyn, when you asked for a little bit more commitment, let's meet every 2 to 3 weeks instead of once a month, didn't like that. And so instead of doing that, I know it didn't explicitly say a work trip, but it's not so much like whether it's a work trip or not, but it's this idea of you kind of being confused about what was going on. And he talks about he's so busy with work. There's so much going on with work, how intense work is, and wanting to respect that. And now he's, going on a ski trip, floofing off with a bunch of friends. So there's this context of maybe some misleading information from Shane, questionable behavior, not being fully transparent. That is alarming. And that's something we see too when, again, like ask for a little bit more commitment or some feedback is given, that someone who's really avoiding can perceive that as like, you're judging me, you're negatively criticizing me, or I can't give you more than meeting once a month. And they'll do things to kind of feel like they're back in control. So it can look like, business meetings, or sorry, like vacation leisure activity that can be like, oh, it's a business trip, or not being really transparent on things. So that's something we can see, and that's something I see coming up here. So again, continuing with the letter, says he replied immediately and apologized for hurting me and agreed to talk, told me it seemed like he was having fun, but he was working most of the time. Lie, question mark? Could be. I think it might be. I do think so as well. He thought that he thought of me several times. Again, lies, maybe. That I'm not really sure. And he was looking forward to meeting me next week. He then went on a long description about how anxious he was about his new job. I tried to encourage him, that could have been the end of it. But a couple of days later, I accidentally opened up his super fan, quote unquote, super fan account, and saw that his following count went up. Since it was already hard to believe what he said, the fact that he was following his fans back made it even harder. So yes, also some context in the email, Evelyn provided me a little bit more, some context. She did share that Shane had a pretty big Instagram following and did some like modeling online. So, having a big super fan account, again, that would make sense with that context. And again, following people back, I'm curious about what that could look like. I've seen that as following other people that maybe he finds to be physically attractive or interested in when they're in a relationship with somebody. So I'm kind of wondering if that's maybe a path we're going down here as we're continuing to read the letter. So again, says I took a screenshot and told him I wanted to talk about this too. He replied, "Sure, what do you want to talk about?" I didn't know if it was feigned ignorance, but I told him I wanted to talk about the details in person. I couldn't get it out of my head though, and asked a Japanese coworker's opinion, and she said that he acted like he was playing around. So I messaged him telling him that I was looking for an arrangement where my partner was not pursuing other sexual or romantic partners, and wanted to know if he was too, because otherwise there was no point in talking about the details. He gave me a very weird reply saying, I'm interested in other cultures, so I would meet other people to chat, but I am not proactive. Um, but I am not proactive, so I would mostly not meet people with sexual romantic interest. That's a weird response. That's a super weird response for this. Evelyn, so yes, I agree. That's a weird response. All you did was ask him, like, are you wanting to see other people sexually or not? It's a yes or no question. Because he recognized that how you respond is going to determine how you want to proceed with this relationship. You kind of have the ball in your court. And I see this as a very weird and distorted way of withholding information from you so that he's trying to take away from you the ability to make the choice. So he's giving you this weird response to try to kind of keep you in a kind of a bit of a limbo spot. And also, I think he's also giving you that response because you caught him doing behavior that you were not impressed with. He didn't know how to respond to it. And there's a wounded ego that he's trying to nurse and lick those wounds with. So there's a lot going on, and that response was just weird for, again, a multitude of reasons. So yeah. Okay, so continuing with the letter. I was at that point furious and sent him a screenshot of our texting back in September when he explicitly said he wasn't seeing other people, and told him, so you were meeting other people after all. He replied he wasn't. I was confused, but admittedly, we never explicitly agreed that this would be an exclusive relationship. So I told him that I didn't care about the past, but I needed him to be exclusive going forward. He said, okay. He also weirdly started initiating texting again, but I was past the point where I could appreciate it. And he also invited me to try his homemade curry for the first time when we met the next time. So I went over to his place a week and a half later. He went on a long monologue about his work and about all the people he has been meeting lately, saying they were all friends and nothing more. He was super cuddly and apologized for not keeping his promise to meet me more than once a month, saying he didn't realize how quickly time was passing. But then he also told me he was, quote unquote, bad at handling stress, quote unquote, was bad at inviting people out, and quote unquote, didn't like choosing restaurants. I didn't think much of these things, and we said goodbye in a good mood. But days later, I started fuming. Did he expect me to always invite him and choose restaurants? If he is bad at inviting people out, why didn't he have any problems inviting me out right after we matched? Were all these just excuses to not have to meet him in public, but he could still get access to me? Evelyn, in a nutshell, I'm going to say yes. And I truly do not think it is coming from intentionally malicious behavior. I do see this as coming from wounds around vulnerability and intimacy. And when we have to bring somebody out in public, maybe we run into somebody we know, or again, meeting people and going out on a date with my girlfriend or something along those lines can make the relationship seem more real and more committed. And that can be really scary. And it can perhaps force shame. It just, again, kind of what I said a moment ago, you can feel like the relationship is more settled and it's real and it's legit. So that can be a reason. That could be a reason. About a week later, I messaged him that I couldn't handle the small inconsistencies anymore. And then if we couldn't talk honestly, then I couldn't keep seeing him. He gave me really weird replies. What do you mean by quote unquote honestly? What you want me to commit, right? And my coworkers were all telling me that he was playing around. So I just replied, you're not getting it, do you? Which he read but left it as is. A couple of days later, he calmed down. I realized that if there was a small chance that he wasn't just stringing me along, I wanted to give it a shot. I messaged him saying that it must have been so frustrating to be attacked over and over, but that I was very sensitive to inconsistencies due to past experiences. So, Evelyn, I think really based on, again, behavior from Shane, these are inconsistencies. And when we see inconsistencies in relationships, whether they're from friends or romantic partners, or even family members, those are red signs. Those are things you understandably are going to be triggered by. When people are inconsistent with us, that's what sets anxiety off. When we have predictability, a healthy predictability and stability and consistency taken away from us, even people that are the most secure people in the world are going to lose their fucking minds, are going to become so anxious because the thing that keeps us secure and stable and calm is consistency, is predictability. And those things are not there. No wonder. And no wonder why concerns about how you're going to feel based on past inconsistencies, like these experiences, when they're coming up for you, it's not going to be any different than what's going on with Shane right now. So I also wanted to highlight that you have every right to be worried about that, Evelyn. You really do. I told him that if he truly not been stringing me along, then I would love to meet him one last time and hear his side of the story. He replied saying that he would think about it and get back. That's not a good response, right? The whole letter, Shane was saying, I'm not stringing you along. I'm not stringing you along. I would never do that. So if that really is, he wasn't stringing you along, that's not the response you're supposed to give to somebody. I was sitting here chuckling. It's not funny. I'm not laughing at the situation. That was kind of the giggle of like, oh my God, this is awful. It's like laughing at a funeral. It's not funny. It's just like, you just feel uncomfortable and like, ooh, like cringy. What do I do? So that's what's going on. That's why I'm like, oh, this is like 10 out of 10 cringe worthy here. My God. And that also, again, really speaks to when we look at avoidant attachment woundings, right? He said the whole time, I'm not stringing you along. But when he was questioned on it, has something changed that we don't know? And maybe someone else came in the relationship. We don't know. And it doesn't mean every single avoidant person does this. That is not the case. I think, again, when we start to have intimacy and vulnerability with another person and we have attachment woundings that get in the way, that tend to lean very dismissive, those things are going to impact our ability to feel like we can be transparent and honest. It is not an excuse. It is not okay. You need to work on that if you engage in these behaviors, but it's just giving some context as to why. That's what I'm here is maybe coming up. So either there is somebody new that's in the picture, or his anxieties have flared so intensely that he doesn't know how to respond to something that feels very vulnerable and intimate for him to respond to. So there's that. Okay. So a week passed and nothing. I messaged him that I wanted to reply soon with when he reached with a thumbs up, but nothing for another week. I messaged him again saying that his thumbs up reaction was confusing and that I would have appreciated a yes or no within a week. Good for you, Evelyn. I want to commend you for sharing that. He thanked my message and said he would get back to me. A week passed by and nothing. He is dragging this out. So anxieties are setting in. I am curious if before this letter ends, maybe something along the lines of, I can't give you what you need. As Ken says, you like mountain hiking, but I don't like mountain hiking. Therefore, we're not compatible. Or something like a favorite that I had when I read a letter. We did the avoidant bingo game with Ken a few letters back was, you have a Netflix account. No, I have a Netflix account and you don't. So we can't date. Just something like that. I wonder if it's going to come up. Usually, right, Shane is pulling away something fierce, man. He is just like anything he can do to get away because his anxieties and his attachment woundings are flaring so much. He doesn't know really how to respond, or now there's questioning and second guessing the relationship again, not because of Evelyn, not because of anything Evelyn did, because of his own fears of intimacy he is not working on. So there is that. So continuing with the letter here. Oh my God, I just got so like hyped up. I lost my place. Um, Here we go. Okay. I sent a sticker with a quote he sent me a year prior, inviting him to quote unquote face the truth together. As the quote said, because there was two sides to the story left unread. A week later, so May 8th, 2025, I sent him the last message along the lines of, I gave you the benefit of the doubt because it was who you were trying to create a close relate because it was you who was trying to create a close relationship in the first place, saying you shared more with me than others. Nonetheless, you dodged clarifying things several times. It, it might not have been intentional, but I feel used. If your intentions changed, you could have just said so. But keeping in the dark, being kept in the dark all this time was really painful. He read it immediately, but no reply since. I had two Japanese coworkers run through our texts from January of 2024 up until now, and they both said they didn't notice any huge sign of him losing interest prior to what happened at the end. Okay, so that's the end of the letter, and Evelyn did share some questions here that I'm going to answer. So actually, well, it's one question, and there's kind of three options. So I'll read them, and then again, I will kind of say like this is kind of what I think if it's A, B, or C, and I'll explain why. So it says again, Dear Megan, the big question, what was the most significant driving factor behind how things unfolded? So then she's giving us three options here. Lukewarm feelings from the get-go with some stringing along for access. B, genuine lukewarm, sorry, try that again. B, genuine feelings fading away and indirect communication due to culture. Again, we communicated in Japanese throughout. Or C, avoidant tendencies. If you notice any, how severe. If you think my behavior was also in some part responsible, that too. So I'm going to give a resounding C, the letter C. If Shane had lukewarm feelings from the get-go and was just using you to string you along for access, he would not have opened up and have been vulnerable with you. He wouldn't have texted you every day. He wouldn't have been so like hot and cold with you, and the intensity wouldn't be there. If he didn't give a shit, you also wouldn't have gotten as far as you did. And also, Evelyn, you wouldn't feel the way that you feel. A really, really common theme amongst everybody in these types of dynamics is that even though the person they were engaging with may have said or showed that they didn't really care about you, there's something inside of us that feels different. And we do sometimes have the avoidant partners. Again, they talk about them circling back and sharing, no, I did love and care about you. I had big feelings for you. I didn't know how to articulate them. I didn't know how to express them in a way that was, healthy and stable. So that's a thing. So not A, like that's not an option. Cross it off. Evelyn, truly, if it was, I would have told you that. This letter would have probably been a lot shorter. Again, when we don't have big feelings about somebody, there's not much to write home about. So not A. B, genuine feelings fading away and indirect communication due to culture. I don't think so. I recognize I am not Japanese. I've never been to Japan. I do know people that are from Japan. But again, not enough to feel like I'm a seasoned expert. But it goes back to, again, these themes, these things I brought out and talked about, whether you're from Japan, you're from Canada, you're from Australia, you're from India, you're from Germany, wherever you're from in the world, we see these similar behaviors. We will have things shared like, I can't give you what you need. I have a Netflix account, you don't. We will see and hear behaviors and phrases from people from all over. So again, it speaks to these are attachment wounding surfacing more than just cultural differences. Definitely, right, there are some cultural differences showing up a little bit, but it's the attachment woundings. So that's absolutely the thing. And also, Evelyn, if it wasn't, if this was really like a cultural thing, I wouldn't have talked about the similarities that I have noticed and highlighted throughout the letter of, oh, this is an attachment wounding surfacing. Oh, this is somebody who's avoidant. I wouldn't have done that if it wasn't there. So again, C, avoidant tendencies. My personal 2 cents, I think that Shane's probably like dismissive avoidant. I think that's where he's leaning. And I, again, I do think it's fairly like severe end here. When we think about the attachment spectrum, it's just that it's a spectrum. We will have anxious on one side, we will have avoidant on the other, we have secure in the middle. Folks that are fearful avoidant, whether they lean dismissive or they lean anxious, they ping pong across the spectrum. But regardless of the attachment style and the severity of it, we're going to have like a bit of, I'm going to call it like the comfy landing spot. We're going to have a place we always land back on within the spectrum. So whether we're anxious or avoidant, or again, if we ping pong, we're going to have a place we will lean into, and it's going to be anxious or avoidant, or again, if we ping pong, but it's also going to be the intensity. There are folks that have a fearful avoidant attachment style that it's actually pretty mild, or there are going to be folks that are really avoidant and it's going to be really severe. Or anxious, it can be really severe, or it can be mild or moderate. It's literally a whole spectrum. So considering how poor communication Shane has, we talked about trauma dumping, him pulling away the last couple weeks when you said, like, what are we doing? Are you seeing other people or not? And he just completely faded away and ghosted you. I think these are leaning a little bit more on the end of severe. That's not okay behavior. It's unacceptable behavior. We tend to see that with folks that, again, lean in that severe territory. Shane needs a lot of help. Shane needs to talk to somebody to help him work on trauma, his attachment woundings, abandonment from his dad when he was 5 in childhood. Shane has a lot he has to work on. And then that question of, was it me? Not really. I mean, all of us have things that we can take accountability for in relationships, things that we can work on. Like, nobody's perfect. Yes, we have things we can work on, but I didn't hear that you were smothering him. I didn't hear that you were badgering him. I didn't hear that you were violating his boundaries, that he communicated. He didn't communicate really any boundaries. I actually heard in the letter, you were the one sharing, hey, what's going on? Are you seeing other people? Are you stringing me along? Like, what's the context of this relationship? Can I see you more often than once a month? So, Evelyn, the thing that may have, I'm going to say, kind of like some of the driving factors were you asking for more information, you asking for clarification, you also being kind and courteous and respectful to him. I know that sounds weird, but a big thing about avoidant attachment woundings, how they develop, how that attachment style develops, is from neglect and dismissal of emotions and pain and like experiences where we're vulnerable. So the fact that you were kind and loving to him, again, probably scared the shit out of him. And he never experienced that in childhood. So when somebody like you gave that to him, he has a little internal narrative of, in some way, shape, or form, I'm not good enough. Or I don't maybe deserve good things. And you challenge that, and that scares him. And if he doesn't know what to do with that, he's going to sabotage. I'm sorry, excuse me. He's going to sabotage it. So that's something that I'm hearing is coming up in this letter reading. So Evelyn, I've really, really heard that. So it's not it's right. So you did quote unquote do things, Evelyn, but you didn't do anything that stood out to me as like okay, girl, we got to back this up and like work on some stuff. You didn't do anything that stood out as abusive, unacceptable, intrusion of boundaries. You did the right thing by sharing what you needed, and he didn't respond to it. So that is my 2 cents on this letter. I recognize this was longer. This letter was longer than expected. I really, really enjoyed reading it. Um, and I hope folks listening as well enjoyed the letter from Evelyn. So um, it was, again, a pleasure. It's always a privilege to read these things. These are some pretty horrific experiences that we can go through. They can create a lot of trauma. Absolutely heart shattering. It just shatters our whole sense of self sometimes. Um, and they're really hard to move through. So again, getting to have these opportunities to read these letters that folks submit, it really is a privilege and it's always a joy. So again, Evelyn, thank you. I really appreciate getting to read this. It really was an honor and a privilege. And if Evelyn, you or other folks are looking to work with me, I do have capacity to see individuals. So I live in Eastern Standard Time. I live about 2 hours from Toronto, and I work Mondays and Tuesdays with Ken. So again, I see people all over the world, different time zones. And if we can make it work and you're interested in working with me for coaching, I have capacity. So I have capacity for some coaching clients. I have space for clarity calls. You can even just shoot me an email. It's on the booking page at Ken Reed Counseling's website. I don't have an Instagram page. I don't have content that I post. So um, I you don't have that opportunity to follow me. So I really just work with Ken in this capacity. So again, if you're wanting to reach out, shoot me an email, and again, or book in through Ken's website. So again, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for the letter. And wherever you are in the world, I hope you have a good day.